A trial date set for 4 Minneapolis officers charged in the death of George Floyd. And Fort Lauderdale police body cam video of a Black Lives Matter protest. What the officers are heard on camera saying. And how one Florida sheriff says he'll respond to protests in his community.
And I'll make special deputies of every lawful gun owner in this county.
Plus, $1 billion slashed from the NYPD budget.
We're shifting functions away from police to civilian agencies.
Right now on Law and Crime Special Report, Keeping the Peace. It's Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. All right, welcome back. We have those great developments in the Epstein case. We will be covering that on the Law and Crime Network. You can be assured, and you can go online and find all the articles. But we have so much other stuff in Keeping the Peace that we've got to get to today. One of them involves the trial date being set in the George Floyd incident. As they say, here comes the judge. Let's take a listen.
Mama, I love you. Lisa, I love you. I love you. My side is listed. I can't breathe nothing, man. It's so good, man. Mama, I love you. I can't do nothing. My face is gone. I can't breathe, man. Please. Please let me stand. Please, man, I can't breathe.
Well, that obviously wasn't the judge, but that will be the incident that the judge is going to be handling this case on an expedited basis. I have Lisa Lockwood with me, internationally recognized crime analyst, media contributor, and a 3-time author. Love having her on the show. Welcome back, Lisa.
Thank you, Bob.
So what happened here is the judge set an expedited schedule here. From what we understand, this judge means business. The order basically sets out how the trial will proceed, when discovery motions are due, when arguments will occur, when briefs are due, and when the trial date is going to occur. And has told the lawyers, we don't want to hear anything about conflicts or other court dates. That is when the trial is occurring, and it's in a short period of time. I think the judge is sending a message that this is going to be moving quickly, no game playing. Thoughts?
Incredibly transparent. It's exactly what the public wants. The public wants this to be expedited. They want answers. They want resolution, and the transparency of saying that this is going to happen at this time. We're going to get those answers quicker, and I think the public can be rest assured that it's going to be a fair trial and a great trial based on that transparency.
You know, Lisa, people don't get this if you're not really practicing law, but the judge's temperament really does set a major tone in the courtroom. And the lawyers know, you know, those judges that like to try cases, those judges that don't want to try cases, that think it's a waste of time. They're looking more for plea offers and resolution that way. But this is a judge that apparently was given this case based on his expertise, as well as kind of laying the law down, which tells the defense bar, you better start being prepared, because the judge is not going to take kindly to any kind of delay tactics.
And that's what we look for in leadership, in any type of leadership, whether it's a police chief in a police agency, whether it's the leader of the free world. We need transparency, and we need to know that this is going to go on target. The public, the eyes on this right now are larger than any case that could be happening right now in our country. So the scrutiny involving this, the judge is well aware, the attorneys are well aware, and as I said before, expediting this and setting the tone for that kind of leadership is completely necessary.
Okay, so we will look forward to seeing whether all 4 officers will be tried at the same time, whether the government tries to flip witnesses against other witnesses, what the varied defenses are going to be, because each individual officer's conduct is a little bit different. It's going to be fascinating from a standpoint of a trial to see how it envelops. Now, in Fort Lauderdale, there was a Black Lives protest that occurred that kind of got violent amongst the protesters as well as the police. And the police are caught on body cam saying certain things as tear gas and rubber bullets are being fired into the crowd. Let's take a listen.
Hey, I need more rounds. I need more rounds. What do you want? What do we got here? CS impact. Hit him with it. There we go. Push him back. Hey, get up here. No, move this way. Yeah, I'm just leaking. Hey, fired 6, and I only got 6 impact left. Okay. I have a lot of gas, though. Impact left. Okay. I have a lot of gas, though. There you go. Throw back. If you pick up some gas, we'll pop. Right now. Yeah, I'm on standby. Yeah. I just got the hit. I only grabbed the gas. I'm like, oh, but.
I just felt pressure. That's all. I knew I was hit with something, and I didn't know if I was possibly hit with, like you said, maybe someone was throwing something and I got hit with it. And I didn't realize, because after I was hit, it just, things kind of slowed down, and I saw people running around me frantic, and I fell to the ground. But it wasn't until people started to try to lift me up and I saw there were pools of blood on the ground, and people were saying, she's been shot, she's been shot. So even in the midst of that, I'm still not really understanding, because I'm saying, hey, grab my phone, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe people are exaggerating, because I really don't think I was shot while I'm here walking away, going to go for someone to help me from the tear gas. And it wasn't until I got in the car, and the one individual, there was a young man that continued to use a shirt or something to kind of put pressure on the wound, and I saw all the blood in the car, and I'm like, was I shot? And the guy said, yes, you were shot. And I began to cry.
All right, Lisa, so some of that was a little difficult to hear, but essentially the argument goes is that the officers at certain points in time were like, I got them, and kind of laughing a little bit here and there during a very tense encounter. Now, there are going to be two sides to this issue, as there always are. The police chief is looking at this. The police chief basically has said that this was a violent encounter. These officers were engaged in the crowd, as you can see, throwing tear gas back at them. This is something that police are put in danger. Do you think that the bawdy talk, if you will, or the laughing or joking about firing these rounds is going to make the day for any kind of criminal charge or an administrative charge against them?
Police felt in this situation they were trying to obviously protect the parking garage of the police department. So they put up a perimeter. First use of force was the tear gas to keep people away from that. As people were breaking through the tear gas, now we have mayhem, we have the cover of the smoke. They're still engaging the police officer. So what's the next course, which was the rubber bullets, in order to do that, to keep people away. We saw civilians throwing projectiles at the police officer. What the projectiles were, there's no way of telling in there. Was it a tear gas canister? Was it being thrown back at the police officers? So they're under fire. What's happening in that scenario is them standing their ground and protecting an area, using the least amount of lethal force that they need in order to stop them from breaking that perimeter. That's what happened. As far as the body talk, lack of decorum, unfortunately, that does come with people being engaged, police officers who are engaged in what they feel is a battle. So swear words, lack of decorum, saying things that are not proper and professional does come with the job. Not for all officers. It's just how a police officer handles themselves on the job, off the job, can be carried over into their work duties.
Yeah, as I see this, I mean, they were, in my mind, justified using force. Force was being deployed back at them. They were trying to maintain control of their police agency. So from that standpoint, the behavior of the officers does not appear, from what we're seeing, to have been inappropriate. They have a right to be able to respond to riots and protests like this. Yeah. Not peaceful protests, that they don't have a right to do that. I only see, basically, if somebody wants to look at it, and given the environment we have today, that Internal Affairs will look at it. I agree with you. They're under stress. There's cursing. That's what goes on in these circumstances. And the joking piece of it, maybe some charge of unprofessionalism or a demeanor complaint, a minor charge filed from an administrative standpoint. What do you think?
Yes, and here's the thing that's disturbing about it all, knowing full well, making the assertion initially, is your camera on, almost as if he thought he was under the cover of not having a camera so that he can freely speak and say something like, oh, did you see, I got him, that sort of thing. Completely unprofessional. Could somebody be suspended for that? Absolutely. And the lack of decorum in that, where he was aware before he made the comment and thinking that the camera was off. So the character of that officer is probably going to be put under scrutiny, as it should be.
Just real quick, in most jurisdictions, this what they have is called progressive disciplining. So depending on the internal affairs record of that particular police officer, say, for example, there was never a complaint filed, the officer has been doing a great job, this is an only incident, at least in my state, and I don't know if it's the same in the jurisdictions that you've been in, anything over a 5-day suspension is considered major discipline, and that would require an actual potential hearing. So typically these suspensions, if anything, are very short-lived.
And you need to look at the priors from that officer. As you mentioned, is it a one-off? Was it the heat of the moment? Did this officer have a prior record showing that he had lack of decorum and he treated the public in a certain way? So you have to pull all of those factors together.
All right, excellent, Lisa. Really appreciate it. We got a lot more here on our plate. Peace. So we're going to take a quick break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Okay, I'm going to make sure I'm going to read this correctly, guys. A Florida sheriff is now threatening to deputize gun-owning citizens to take action against protesters. Let me say it directly in the camera. He's threatening to deputize gun owners who have not been trained in law enforcement tactics, regular, ordinary citizens who own a weapon, to take action against protesters. Let's take a listen.
Yes, we'll protect your constitutional rights as long as you remain under the umbrella of peaceful protest or peaceful march. But the second that you step out from up under the protection of the Constitution, we'll be waiting on you. And we'll give you everything you want. All the publicity, all the pain, all the glamour and glory for all that 5 minutes will give you. Is it a threat? Absolutely not. But somebody has to step up in front of the camera and say, enough is enough. Tearing up Clay County, that's not going to be acceptable. And if we can't handle you, you know what I'll do? I'll exercise the power and authority as the sheriff, and I'll make special deputies of every lawful gun owner in this county. And I'll deputize them for this one purpose, to stand in the gap between lawlessness and civility. That's what we're sworn to do. And that's what we're going to do. You've been warned.
Lisa, I guess I'm going to go back to my civil rights days when I used to file complaints for police brutality, malicious prosecution, and false arrest, and say, I'm pretty confident that that statement by the sheriff is going to be Exhibit A. It may be the very first thing. I may even show it in summation and say, I've got no further questions or statements to make to you folks. What are you doing creating evidence like that? This is before we get into the tactical issues associated with it. What was that?
Oh gosh, I felt like that was a clip from the Wild Wild West, and Clint Eastwood was standing his ground. This is a very frustrated sheriff, no question about it. He doesn't want any nonsense in his town. He's watching, obviously, what's happening across the nation, what's happening in the hot spots in Minnesota and Seattle, and the no-nonsense approach of will not happen on my watch and in my jurisdiction is what he's trying to convey here.
Yeah, well, I don't know if this guy is serious about the idea of having armed citizens as a militia go out there who are haven't we learned enough that training is an issue with the police officers that go through the 1,000 hours and get certified as police officers? You expect civilians with weapons to understand the quote-unquote Constitution, the laws, use of force, self-defense. That's a recipe for disaster. I almost can't even believe that he would think of doing that, because talk to us, Lisa, about the tactical operational plans that jurisdictions have by being able to tap into other law enforcement jurisdictions should they have a problem, which is the appropriate way to go about it.
Yes, because we have alliances or alliances across the nation. When you don't have the resources there, you do. You use county, you use federal. We call the National Guard if needed. Our nation is equipped with some of the finest and best, well trained law enforcement personnel. It would never come to that scenario. And I think he was just creating that to rile up maybe future voters for him, rile up the people who are pro Second Amendment, and just to let them know that we have your back. So yeah, the repercussions, obviously, and the lawsuits that could possibly happen for a citizen who is armed and then takes action without all of the training necessary, all of the law and education, is just a major lawsuit.
Yeah, Lisa, we talked about this a little bit off camera, and I can't repeat this message enough. It's a chicken and an egg debate that goes on in the law enforcement circles. Some states have appointed by the governor prosecutors and judges. That's what I was. I was appointed in New Jersey. Other states have elected district attorneys and elected judges. I think all states, the sheriffs are pretty much elected, but they do operate differently. When you're appointed and you have a term of office, it's more of a tendency to look at the law and the facts and the protection of the community. I'm not saying that elected officials are bad people, but I think it causes these kind of statements to be made to pander to the voting public. What do you think about this this age-old debate, whether it's better to be elected and held accountable by the court of public opinion, or appointed and be held accountable by a court of law?
Yeah, very true. I mean, in both cases, I do believe there are pros and cons to either side of that. And it all depends on who gets into office and then how they act while they're in office, what they do, what kind of enforcement that they show, what is their record prior to. Why did the public elect them? Is it because of rhetoric that happened along the campaign trail, so to speak? Or why were they appointed? Because they had a record already in law enforcement and they were able to show that and impress their higher ups. So there are pros and cons to both. And in this particular case, as I mentioned before, is it him just stepping out and showing the citizens that this is what I'm going to do to protect you?
You know, Lisa, I've been a big fan in the last couple of months with all of the bad news that's out there and all the different things that you look at, that I turn the channel to the Andy Griffith Show a lot of times, just like have my mouth open and watching a peaceable, more friendly time. But in that show, often and sometimes they need deputies. So they just give a badge and they say, but, now you're a deputy. Can this even be done legally? Can he allow citizens to form a kind of militia in order to combat protesters? Is that even a lawful thing that he can do?
The way he projected it appeared to be there is something on the books if we got to a place where we really needed to protect, whether it be a civil war or any kind of terrorist activity outside that was coming in to harm, and we were deplete of resources. So I would imagine it appeared he did make a reference to he would use his lawful power to take that action. So I'd be interested to see what the legislation is regarding that.
Yeah, well, this isn't Mayberry. These are real cops with real guns that have a duty to protect the community. And I think that it would create a horrible situation. I can't even believe it was done for anything other than political bluster. Got to move on, Lisa. NYPD budget, police budget has been cut by $1 billion. Now, they had an $80+ billion budget to begin with. Let's take a listen to Mayor de Blasio speaking about it.
We are reducing the size of our police force by not having the next recruit class. We are reducing our overtime levels. We're shifting functions away from police to civilian agencies. It's a huge initiative. And on top of that $1 billion worth of activity, another $500 million in money that was in the police for major projects, major capital projects, that's now going to go into youth centers and broadband access for public housing residents. I really think if people look at these facts, they're going to recognize this is a huge reinvestment in communities while we still stay safe as a city. I'm very comfortable we struck the right balance. And again, what I'm saying represents, I am certain, the majority of New Yorkers who want this to be a safe city. They want more fairness, they want more reform, but they also want to make sure we consistently stay safe.
All right, Lisa, a full disclaimer here. I'm not a big fan of Mayor de Blasio with respect to how he's treated the police department, the manner in which he goes about that. But he's actually getting a lot of flack, so our viewers understand this. There were people in the defund the police movement and many others that felt that what he did here was really meaningless. What he basically did was stop one or two recruiting classes, so there will be less officers. And he also moved the officers' responsibility from schools and I think taking care of the homeless, and is going to move that more into a civilian kind of agency. So that justifies not having as many officers, but he uses what a chief executive officer should be saying. So I'm kind of looking at this one like, for him at least, and I normally don't do this, he's really not doing anything that's going to affect the safety and welfare of the community. He's just kind of shifting resources around, and that's why he's being critiqued for not having done enough. Thoughts?
Yeah, my thought is this. Police officers are recruited based on population. So you need to have a certain amount of police officers in order to enforce and do the job of keeping the public safe. If you reduce that number, that means more people are not being protected by police officers. Reappropriating money to homeless, to school safety and to homeless groups, that's fine, and it does make sense to do a reappropriation and putting people who are more skilled in that psychological aspect and giving the resources to what those particular areas need makes perfect sense to do a reappropriation. So not getting the police officers in and stopping recruit classes doesn't make sense. How do you reduce overtime when you don't have resources anymore? So overtime would rise because you don't have the police officers to handle all of the situations that are out there. So it's a population issue. Doesn't make sense.
Lisa, you know this game. I've dealt with this myself when I was prosecutor. But, you know, I also think that there's going to come a time, I don't know, mark my words, Lisa, what do you think, that somebody's going to come knocking on the door saying, our communities are not as safe as they used to be. We need more police officers.
Yeah, and that's what's going to happen inevitably. We have data. We know what the crime rates are. We know the different areas and the pockets where we have the most trouble spots across the nation. Everybody is aware of that, and they want more policing, more policing. Even some Black Lives Matter group members talk about that. We need more, not less.
I know. I've literally been in the room when the complaint is that the policing was only happening in the affluent communities, but not necessarily in the socioeconomically depressed communities. They had that feeling, and they wanted more police presence there so that they could be better protected. It's a chicken and egg thing, and then when that happens, then there's sometimes a concern. Lisa, I unfortunately don't have enough time. I would love to be able to speak to you all day long about these issues. We got so much more coming up. Our regularly scheduled program is coming up next. Stay with us here at the Law and Crime Network. I'll see you soon.